It's that special time of year again. That time of year where corporations plaster rainbows all over their logos to try and convince us to give them more of our money. That time of year where the entire LGBTQ+ community explodes into discourse about kink and whether or not it's acceptable at Pride, and how asexuals don't really count as LGBT because they can pass for straight, and they're basically just incels who want attention. Well, that's actually all year, but it certainly does taste a little more bitter during Pride Month. Did you have a good Pride Month? I had a good Pride Month because I spent it reading Effie Calvin's Tales of Inthya series. Tales of Inthya is a series of sapphic romance novels set in a fun fantasy world with magic and dragons and evil gods. They're all super short and comfy. The audiobooks are only about 8 to 9 hours long, and as for the written versions, I can usually knock out a book or two in an afternoon. One of the things that I really like about the series is how inclusive it is. It's got fat girls, it's got skinny girls, it's got feminine girls and girls who fucking love swords. It's got werewolf girls, it's got a girl who is a literal goddess, and that is the best one, do not fucking at me. But in her attempt to be inclusive, I feel as though Effie Calvin may have made a bit of a misstep with regards to how she handles gender in her books. The trans characters, she handles those beautifully. There are priestesses who have a special magic where they can help people transition with magic. And it's so common that basically everybody in the world tries it at least once just to see what it's like. So when one of the later girlfriends mentions having done so, it's in passing in a conversation and then never comes up again because it's just not that big a deal. However, there is one thing that is just not handled very well. Now, I don't know Effie Calvin personally. I don't know what's in her heart, and given the way that these books are written and how empathetically the subject matter is treated, I am willing to give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that she is making a somewhat clumsy attempt at inclusivity and not coming from a place of bigotry. With that out of the way, in Inthya there are 3 genders. There's male and female and also neutroid, which is fantasy non-binary. They go by they, them pronouns and have their own styles of gendered clothing, and the problem with that is that non-binary is not third gender. Non-binary is an umbrella term that encompasses a wide variety of gender identities. Agender people and gender-fluid people are both equally non-binary, unless the individual in question does not identify as non-binary because while labels can be useful tools, they are not the be-all, end-all of our identities. Language is fake and our understanding of ourselves and our relationship to our genders and sexualities is always evolving. Anyway, maybe the neutroi are more complex than third gender, but the point of view characters were busy with their own stuff and the neutroi characters aren't really that important. None of the major characters are neutroi that I can remember. I guess there is Inthya, who created Inthya, but they don't really appear beyond passing mention in a couple of books. And there was a general, I think, in the first book who even had a spoken line. And there was a neutroi bit part in the second book who I don't think had any spoken lines and was only in one scene and then never appeared again. And then there was an ambiguously neutroid child bandit in the fourth book who existed for one chapter and then never appeared again. And those are all the neutroid characters who I can remember out of 5 books. So given how unimportant neutroid characters are in these books, I can't really blame Effie Calvin for not killing her pacing and having a huge exposition dump about what being a neutroid even means. There are pretty girls to woo and dragons to fight. That is my one real gripe with the series, and I hope it is addressed in later books. The other much smaller gripe I have with the series as a whole is the crazy fantasy names. They start off not too bad, like a Sophie, that's just Sophie with an E in front of it, I can handle that, but then we get to cities like Xylaluth. So the audiobooks, more than just being a convenient way to experience the story while your hands and or eyeballs are busy, is a helpful pronunciation guide. I'm going to start going into plot specifics now, so there will be spoilers from here on out. If you're looking for a really comfy fantasy series with fun characters and really sweet romances, you should stop watching this video right now and go buy these books. Give Effie Calvin your money. Or, if you can't do that, see if you can find the books in your local library. I don't know. I finished writing the script for this video, a review of all 5 of these books, and then I deleted it by mistake, and now I have to rewrite the entire video that doesn't have anything to do with the books. I just needed you to know my pain. So obviously this review is going to be a little different from my usual stuff. Instead of going through each book beat by beat, I'm just going to talk about each book individually and say whatever comes to mind. The series starts out super strong with the Queen of Euphlaria. It's great. I love Sophie and Adele so much, and I was basically instantly on board for their romance. They have really nice chemistry, and it's fun to watch them learn to compromise with each other. This is skipping ahead a bit, but here's a bit from a later book that I think really encapsulates why these two make a good couple. Adele was impulsive and uncertain, and sometimes downright absurd. But Sophie knew that she could usually back up her more radical ideas with well-reasoned arguments if Sophie really pressed her. It had taken some practice, but Sophie had learned not to dismiss Adele's more ridiculous declarations out of hand. And in return, Adele was learning to explain herself, rather than just make a statement and expect everyone else to understand her reasoning. And you can see the beginnings of that dynamic in this book, when Sophie is pretty sure that she's going to need to burn down the temple/hospital because bacteria sounds fake and surgery has got to be sacrilege. Adele has to have an impromptu debate with her in order to protect the hospital, and she does an admirable job for somebody who was wholly unprepared to have a debate and explain why hospitals are good, actually. I do feel like the romance aspect is strangely divorced from the rest of the book. Like, they're not totally divorced. A major component of Adele's attempts to woo Sophie was doing research about dragons. But it was the act of researching that was important, and Adele could have been researching anything that was relevant to Sophie's interests. But it gave Effie Calvin a convenient way to exposit about how the Dragon Emperor works, and set up the fact that defeating that one specific dragon would be enough to end the war. That is basically exactly what happens as Sophie jumps straight down his throat and blows his head off from the inside in a move so crazy that the literal goddess who blessed her with magic had to take her to wizard heaven for a minute to go, Sophie, what the fuck? And that is why Sophie fucking rules. But I do kind of hate that fantasy trope where they beat the head bad guy and all of the other bad guys die or explode or stop attacking or whatever. As Sophie and Adele actually spend surprisingly little time in the same room. Sophie is very focused on getting used to living in a whole new country and dealing with the dragon problem and creating her magic school, and Adele is busy having much more internal struggle where she goes from I am an 18-year-old bisexual disaster who isn't even good at being in charge of my own life and now you want me to be in charge of a whole country, to I am still woefully unfit for this position, but I can and will learn to do better. And I just think that's neat. Moving on to the next book, Daughter of the Sun. This one is my favorite one. You don't need to read Queen of Euphlaria to understand what's going on, because it takes place in a different country and stars completely unrelated characters. So if you, for some reason, can only get one of these books, get this one. It is the best one. First of all, it is enemies to lovers. It's also a fun cross-country adventure where every chapter they stop at a new town and have a little mini-adventure, and that is 100% my shit. I would watch a 12-season Monster of the Week type show about these two cute lesbians wandering around fighting monsters and solving mysteries, no question. Alia is super fun and cute, and watching her try to navigate the mortal world with her new mortal body is honestly really endearing. It's a small thing, but there's this really cute scene where she decides that lemons and sugar taste good together and tries to make it into a drink. And she proudly shows off her new invention to Orsina, who's like, ah yes, lemonade. It just tickles me every time. And Orsina is a good person who doesn't deserve any of the shit she has to deal with. Her whole thing is that she was told she had a literal mission from a literal god to go on a quest, but the person who the god told to send her on the quest didn't have any details about what she was supposed to be doing or where she was even supposed to go, so she spends just 2 years all alone doing non-stop traveling, pausing only to fight something. And there's this one chapter late in the book that's basically just the Orsina bullying hour. She finds out that the cute girl she had complicated feelings for was actually an evil goddess the whole time, and then she finds out that the girl back home who she was in love with married somebody else, and her whole mission from God was just a lie. And then the girl she was in love with had the audacity to swing by her house like, hey, I never loved you, but you can be my side piece when I get bored of my husband. And Orsina just deserves so much better. Anyway, now she has a cute literal goddess girlfriend and they go on fun adventures together, so I guess she came out ahead in the end. Alia gives us some useful exposition about the various gods who will become increasingly involved in the plot of these books. And I don't just mean that Alia, the literal goddess, becomes a recurring character in later books. I mean other gods fuck with the plots of later books, and I don't care for that. But we will get there when we get there. Anyway, it's good to get a little more exposition that a different character wouldn't be able to help give us. as well as the first hints of something bigger that these books seem to be building up to. Third book, Queen of Rhodia, is a direct sequel to The Queen of Aflaria. It stars Sophie and Adele again, and the relationship is still good. Adele and Sophie are still super cute, and their dragon baby is a perfect prince who has never done anything wrong in his life. The plot of the book mainly focuses on Sophie's confrontation with her abusive mother, the eponymous Queen of Rhodia, and it's pretty good. There's fun scenes with the dragons, and Aelia and Orsina show up, and that's fun. There is one thing about the book that I don't like very much. Somewhere towards the middle of the book, Sophie suddenly collapses, and they find out that she's been poisoned. Somebody tried to assassinate Sophie. Who would do this, and why? Well, I hope you weren't expecting a fun mystery story where Adele shows how much she's grown since the first book by heading an investigation into an assassination plot. Well, I hope you weren't expecting a fun mystery story where Adele shows how much she's grown since the first book by heading an investigation into an assassination plot. And what's worse is the culprit. Okay, in the first book there's a priestess who has a few spoken lines of dialogue, but I don't think they ever tell us her name, which is weird because the person she talks to is Adele, who makes it a point to know people's names. It's a whole thing. So it is weird that she never got the name. Anyway, best case, the culprit was this priestess who appeared twice and had maybe a dozen lines of spoken dialogue across 2 books, appeared one time in this book and then disappeared from the plot forever. And if that priestess wasn't the same as the one from the first book, that's even worse. She's just a whole new character who has like 4 lines of spoken dialogue, appears for precisely one scene where she does the poisoning and then is never seen or heard from again. Her motive makes sense and was kind of set up, but given how much narrative weight is put on the assassination attempt when it happens, the fact that it's basically dropped until the end of the book when they're like, oh yeah, that was solved off screen, just feels really weird and out of place. So the assassination attempt doesn't really tie into the main conflict of the book, which is between Sophie and Gael. So I can see why Effie Calvin wouldn't take time away from the important conflict to focus on one that is only tangentially related. And the assassin on the loose gives Sophie a convenient excuse to run away to Dragon Island. But I feel like there must have been an easier way to get her there. Aside from that one misstep, I really liked this book. It was nice to revisit these 2 characters who I like a lot, and watching mostly Sophie grow and change was a lot of fun. Adele, well, the narrative is mostly against Adele. She's doing her best, but it feels like the narrative is actively preventing her from growing as a person. She spends a lot of the book being sad, because Sophie won't tell her what's bothering her, and how can Adele help Sophie if Sophie won't just talk to her? And the rest of the time she's either making everything worse, or blundering straight into mortal peril. Adele is the only protagonist so far who has 0 combat ability, and she spends a lot of her time on Dragon Island getting almost killed by the non-dragon creatures who live there. Gael straight up tries to murder her on Dragon Island. And that scene is actually pretty important. I'm going to describe it for you, even though I'm sure if you're watching this spoiler portion of the video, you've gone and bought and read all of these books already. This is just a little refresher. So all of the dragons meet on Dragon Island, while Gael comes over and promises to give them magic in exchange for joining her army. Adele argues that she can't do that and is lying. And eventually Gael decides to outright murder Adele, but Aelia takes the attack and goes to hang out in heaven for a few minutes while she recharges. The dragons tell Gael that she needs to get out of there, because attacking the goddess in front of them offended them. Keep this scene in mind. We will be talking about it later. On to the 4th book, Empress of Zaite. I do not like this book as much as I liked the others. That's not to say it's a bad book, it's perfectly serviceable. The story, well, it is, and the characters are pretty... Well, Orsina and Aelia show back up, and they're still very fun. So the plot of the book is that the Emperor of Zaite dies in battle, and while he meant to name his younger daughter Inthya his heir, he didn't before he died. So now Joanna is going to take the crown, and everyone dislikes that because they don't like her. She has the wrong magic, and she doesn't even lift, bro. And how is she supposed to be a warrior empress who leads them into glorious conquest if she doesn't even lift? So Inthya stages a coup, and a visiting princess named Vitalia overhears Nithya's plot and goes to warn Joanna, but she gets caught when the coup starts, so she and Joanna escape the palace together, and they travel around Zaite for a bit and do a fire emblem. You know, they they collect a variety of named NPCs who can help them take back the capital until Effie Calvin realizes that she doesn't want to write a big battle scene, so Vitalia gets kidnapped and Joanna gets super magic and goes to the capital to deal with her sister and the coup on her own. And I guess I'm being a little hard on the book because I do not care for this ending one bit. It was set up before it happened. Joanna was told that Vitalia might get captured if she brings her along to the war, and then Vitalia gets captured. The main problem that I have with the story is actually the love story this time. I just don't buy these two as a couple. I get why Joanna likes Vitalia. She's pretty and a nice person who might be the only person on the planet who isn't just using Joanna for political gain. But I don't know why Vitalia likes Joanna. She's nice, but they don't, agree on anything. They don't have shared principles, you know? Vitalia is basically a Dale 2.0. She's free-spirited and flighty and doesn't want to be in a position of power because she cannot handle that sort of responsibility. But unlike Adele, she's really petty and selfish and completely obsessed with being upset that her dad is remarrying years after her mother's death. I don't like her, and I think Joanna deserves better. And unlike in the previous books, there's no real bonding moment between these two characters before they decide that they're in love after knowing each other for 3 whole days. And the reason they fall in love is because they're soulmates. The gods say so. And at least one of the gods arranged things so that they would meet and fall in love so that Joanna can use the power of love to go supernova and punch a hole in the palace, or whatever. It takes away from the character's agency, and I think that makes for a much weaker story than it otherwise could have been. I've got another scene to describe for you that I need you all to keep in mind for later. Just pin this one up on the board next to the last one. While rescuing Vitalia, Regmadra, the war goddess, turns up and is about to kill Joanna, but she's stopped by Delu, the love goddess, because killing each other's champions is against the rules. And they ignore the humans and bicker about Regmadra changing domains, and Regmadra doesn't want to change her domain. Warfare is cool and good, and she likes it, but Delu says that she needs to change it because constant warfare just isn't sustainable. So that's the scene. I need you to keep that in mind. Moving on to the next and most recent book, The Daughter of the Moon. I do like this book better than Empress of Zaite, but I don't know if I like it as much as I liked the first 3 books. It stars Inthya, who has a really interesting character arc over the course of the book. She was the antagonist of the previous book, but it's clear that she was never outright evil. She was just misguided and being pushed into doing a coup by the literal war goddess who was screaming in her ear. And it isn't until she's exiled to Aflaria and meets her true love, Clavida, that she's able to start unlearning her toxic behaviors. And Clavida is a really fun character in her own right. She was born into a family of werewolves, but they're the shapeshifter type of werewolf who can just wolf out whenever they want, except Clavida can't. She was born with the blessing, but for reasons she doesn't understand, she is completely unable to transform like the rest of her family. And these two are another one of those ordained by the gods couples, and the reason Clavida can't transform is because the gods knew that she would go to Aflaria to research ways of fixing her blessing, which would put her on a collision course with her true love. But I don't mind it as much this time because, well, maybe just because I like both of these characters more than I liked Vitalia. They have these cute moments where they bond, and it makes sense that they would like each other. But also it feels like these two characters have a lot more agency in their romance than Joanna and Vitalia did. Okay, so remember those 2 scenes I had you keep in mind? The climax of this book comes when all of the dragons gather up on Dragon Island. They listen to Regmadra, who promises them magic in exchange for joining her army. Inthya and Clavida tell the dragons that she's lying, and Regmadra tells Inthya to kill Clavida in order to earn her forgiveness. The dragons tell Regmadra that she needs to go because telling somebody to murder their girlfriend is actually really fucked up, and they don't like that. And then Delu shows up and argues with Regmadra about changing her domain, because constant warfare just isn't sustainable and she needs to find a new one. So it's weird that Effie Calvin just did the same scenes twice, isn't it? And I guess she just hoped nobody would notice, or is she trying to make, parallels between these 2 scenes somehow, and I just don't get what she's driving at. Anyway, the ending of this book made me really excited because it implies that Inthya is also going to become a werewolf, and I'm so hyped for these werewolf lesbians. Immediately when I read it, my brain was like, yes, Joanna is going to be in peril and that she will be saved by her werewolf sister who is on her side now. And if that doesn't happen in the next few books, I will be forced to write fanfiction where it does. Overall, Tales of Inthya is a bit of a mixed bag, but I'm ultimately hopeful about the upcoming books. They're clearly building up to something, like a conflict with the Outsiders or the evil elves who keep getting mentioned but haven't appeared yet, or both at the same time, and I cannot wait. Thank you so much for watching. Do you prefer this style of video where I talk about many books, or the ones where I go really in depth about one book in particular? Let me know in the comments what you think. And if you did like this video, there is a button you can hit to tell me so. And if you really liked it, you can subscribe and hit the bell so you will see these videos as they come out. And if you really liked the video, I have a patreon.com/interg where you can see these videos early, as well as bonus episodes that you can only see if you are a patron. Okay, bye!